I would like to begin by acknowledging the Whadjuk people, the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today, and to pay my respect to the elders, both past and present. I would like to specially welcome the Honorable Bill Johnson, MLA, the Honorable Nick Goran, MLC, and our very special guest speaker today, Dr. Penny Flett, Australian Order recipient, my Deputy Mayor, Councillor Lindsay Holland, and all the councillors of the City of Canning, Mrs. Lynn Russell, the CEO, and all the divisional heads. I am pleased to welcome you all to the first Canning Business Networking event. The City of Canning is placing a high priority on engaging with our business community. Our new Economic Development Directorate has a focus on engagement and creating opportunity to support businesses in Canning. It is not only important that we provide a forum for council to meet with businesses, but for Canning businesses to meet with each other. As part of our commitment to businesses in Canning, I am very happy to announce today that the City of Canning is creating a business advisory group. Now, the business advisory group will be made up of members of our business community with an objective to provide a reference point to focus on areas of economic development strategy, and to ensure that this key sector of the community is provided with an appropriate communication mechanism in the city, and to provide strategic advice to the city, and in turn, counsel on issues that affects the business community in Canning, and to raise the profile of the business community in council activities and planning. We really need people like you, and I encourage you to nominate. It is important that our business owners have a voice in this city. If you are interested in nominating, you will see all the information in your gift bag this morning. In closing, I would sincerely like to thank our principal partner, the Telstra Business Centre of Belmont, for their support in our first season of business event. They are here today and have information specifically for businesses about NBN and how you can benefit from this new technology. Please take a moment to speak with them as the NBN will be rolling out across the City of Canning very soon. Thank you very much and enjoy your breakfast.
I'd just now like to introduce you to Lynn Russell, the CEO of the City of Canning, who will provide a quick presentation.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome, everybody. It's fantastic to see so many business people on our first event. And this is about us being actually open for business as a city, which is something we're delighted to be able to announce. So what is this beast called the City of Canning? For those of you who aren't familiar with our framework, obviously we're in a very strategic position in terms of Perth's southeast suburbs, only 10 k's to the CBD. 65 square kilometres. It's a sizable city with over 100,000 residents. And many people don't know, but we are the most multicultural council in Perth, which is wonderful. And I think the constitution of our business community does also reflect that multiculturalism, which is fantastic. And the exciting thing for Canning is that in 2015, in October, we elected our new council after 3 years of not having a council. And our brand new council are very keen and very determined to be actively involved in investment, in partnering with developers, businesses and other groups. So I think your presence here today is the first of a number of activities that are going to signify a strong partnership between the council and the business community. Back in 2014, we did our embryonic economic development strategy. And we've now produced a new strategy that you'll have copies of. And when you have a look at some of the information about Canning, when you realise the volume of business in this city, we are an economic powerhouse for Perth. We've got 52,000 people. Manufacturing is still our largest sector. Our gross regional product of $9.64 billion, which is just extraordinary. 8,000 local businesses, 73, going up to 80,000 jobs, and a population, as I said, close to 100,000. So it's a big place and it's got a lot of business. And every day, 41,000 people actually come into Canning to work, as some of us know who try to get here in the morning with the congestion on our roads, and that's another issue that Council is working on. But you can see that we are very much a hub where people are coming to work on a daily basis. Our retail, of course, is one of our highlights. And we have the Strategic Metropolitan Centre, Westfield Carousel, and I acknowledge we have a representative here from Centre today. Thank you for joining us. This is WA's largest shopping centre. Would you believe they get 11 million customer visits annually across the road here at Westfield? It's just extraordinary. And the really exciting thing for all of us as businesses in our city is the fact that Centre are investing over $250 million in the expansion of the Westfield Centre. And of course, around that will be built a brand new city centre. And you may have seen some quite significant development occurring around that area in recent months, with quite a bit of particularly medium density housing occurring close to the train station. We have other district centres, of course, at Bentley, which is subject to some major investment and development at the present time. Riverton, Southlands and Livingston, and of course a number of neighbourhood and local centres. But of course the area that many of you are involved with is our industrial and commercial part of the city. And we have two world-class industrial areas. We have Canning Vale and we have Welshpool. And it's interesting to watch on a weekly and monthly basis the changing nature of the activity of those areas, with more office and more warehouse and distribution, because our economy, while it has traditionally been manufacturing based, is now transitioning into other industries. We're currently undertaking an assessment of industrial supply and demand, and that will assist us in terms of things like our land use planning and our investment facilitation and marketing. And we're also a landowner in these precincts. We do have substantial land holdings, and we're looking to see how our land parcels can actually contribute to the growth and development of those two very important industrial areas. We're also very respectful of the value of small business in Canning. In this particular region, we have 54,000 small businesses with an average employee size of 7. And so to support those small businesses in this region, there is an active program of business events that are occurring here in this venue, in the town hall, and in a number of other venues across the city. And you'll see in your pack a number of new events that are occurring in coming months. Obviously, small to medium enterprise growth is vital, so we want to support you and partner with you. And our business partners have created a net economic impact of $2.5 million from the delivery of advisory services to small business. One of the things that the city is very proud to own is the Welshpool Business Enterprise Centre, WEBEC. And this is a flexible and space which offers services to a range of businesses currently tenanting that facility, with factory units and office units, a cafe and a training room. Some of you may not be aware of its location in Welshpool. It's a very substantial facility. and it has wonderful opportunities in the future as a base to broaden the delivery of services to Canning's business sector through things like business advisory services and training and events. So currently we're working actively with the WEBEC board to establish a new focus and strategy and direction for the Enterprise Centre. Commercial growth projections to 2031, just as a matter of interest, this is what they're telling us is going to happen in this particular area. We're looking at increased demand for net leasable area, in particularly retail in the Canning City Centre and district centres, for office floor space in the city centre and Welshpool and Canning Vale industrial areas, and some of those in terms of entertainment floor space is quite interesting with some of the potential growth areas such as areas to do with IT, entertainment, and activities around sporting and other uses. So it's not necessarily going to be traditional land uses. So to sum up, I guess what we're keen to do is to move forward to position the city as a place that offers a diverse investment and business opportunity, actively open and looking for assistance to business. And in some ways, part of the way we can support business is to get out of their way and not provide too much red tape and too many constraints to the effective expansion and growth of our business sector. Our strategic planning is important that we actually develop good land use plans to help business know and have certainty about their future growth. Engagement, such as the events we're doing today, and looking at our infrastructure requirements to meet your business needs, whether they be things like roads or whether they be things like NBN, to ensure that you do have access to the digital economy. So for the future, the estimated growth in population to 2036 will be about 126,000 people. And dwellings, we're looking at a 23% increase in dwellings to 42,000. So there's real opportunities for business here in looking at that growth. So that will lead to more jobs, and I guess our role is to make sure we fully understand what the future will look like for Canning, so we can work with business to ensure that that is successful for them individually and collectively. And I'd like to echo the Mayor's final call. Our business advisory group is going to provide for the first time a voice for business into council. This will give a chance for business people across our sector to be represented, to give us advice and feedback about the directions we're taking to support you. So again, a plug for those of you who are interested, please nominate for the business advisory group. We'd love to see your face again in the future. So welcome. Thank you very much, Mike. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt the networking that we've encouraged you to do, but I know that you'll want to hear from our wonderful guest speaker today, and my job is to briefly introduce my friend and colleague, Dr Penny Flett. Penny is, just for a little bit longer, Chief Executive of the Brightwater Group. She's Pro-Chancellor of the University of Western Australia. But an amazing woman who began her career after graduating in medicine from the University of Adelaide. Her early years were spent in a variety of locations and roles, including 4 years with the RAF. In 1974, she became the first woman in peacetime to hold a male rank and the first woman doctor to serve in the RAF. She was awarded 1998 Telstra Australian Businesswoman of the Year, and then the Centenary Medal in 2003. She's contributed to many government and non-government boards and associations in order to support good planning, service excellence, and the inclusion of all affected by the ageing of our society. Dr Flett was able to focus on her long-term interest in the elderly in the late 1970s, and she pursued postgraduate qualifications in both geriatric medicine and medical administration in the 1980s. She has become a champion for people of all ages who need a high level of ongoing support and service. She is convinced that achieving successful ageing in our society in the next few decades must begin now with strong and innovative leadership. And Dr Flett is currently Pro-Chancellor of the University of WA, Chair of the WA Aged Care Advisory Council and Chair of Methodist Ladies College Council. Please join with me in welcoming Penny Flett.
Well, good morning, everybody. What a lovely day. What a great gathering of people. What an exciting venture. Lynn, thank you very much for that. I'm going to... the trouble with Google is you can't wipe what's on it about you. And that's a bit of a nuisance. Because I don't look back, I tend to look forward. Mayor, thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to meet you, and you have a wonderful time in front of you and all your councillors. And I know what it's like when organisations go through tough times, then you have a rebirth and nothing can stop you. So it is absolutely fantastic. And from what you just said, Lynn, Canning is set to absolutely flourish, and how. So welcome to all business leaders and special people of Canning and everybody else. And thank you very much for having me. I was just reflecting before I start, and I just need to make this comment. The multiculturalism and the great diversity of ethnic backgrounds is not only in Canning. I have 2,200 and something staff. They're all amazing people. And amongst those people, I have 60 different ethnic backgrounds, which is, the richness of diversity is absolutely fabulous, but it brings its own challenges to people who are supposed to be managing or leading, because you have to understand, or make the best possible effort you can to understand where people come from, what their cultural background is, what their expectations are, how they communicate, and how you can engage together successfully. So I think it's a wonderful thing, but it's upon all of us to make sure we know each other and look after each other. I'm not Australian born either, and I remember it took me 2 years that I did not expect that were really, really tough. And I spoke English, and I thought I could just walk in and become part of the community. So after 1 week, this was in Adelaide, after 1 week, back in the mid-60s, when I'd heard about these whinging Poms in Elizabeth, excuse me if there's any English people in this room, I thought, that's it. I gave myself 1 week to turn into an Australian, and I've been proudly Australian ever since. And since coming to WA in 1984, I'm very proudly a Aussie. Except I still have a penchant for the cats in Geelong, but we won't go there. I'm not going to give you a didactic anything. You can buy textbooks on leadership. There's a whole industry out there that will tell you how to do it. I thought today I'd just keep things really, really simple. I'm going to tell you very, very briefly about my own organisation, not to sell it or brag about it, but just to reflect on how complex it is, and how we've managed to go from where it was when I first went there to where it is today, just as a bit of a story, an example of coping with and leading mostly successfully into great diversification and expansion and keeping up with the times and keeping one step ahead and all of that sort of thing. And then I was just going to make some comments from the heart about my personal experience, in the sense that if there are things in there that I can share with you about how it has been and what I reflect on, what's been useful and what helps and what actually works. The trouble with when I make comments is people go, yeah, that all sounds very soft. Believe me, none of this is soft. But if I put it into the sort of colloquial, not quite chat language, if you go look at a textbook, you'll find it, but it'll be in totally different language. So this is just me talking to you. And I think the question and answer at the end, if you choose to use it, is probably going to be the most valuable for you. So turn it into a discussion at the end if you wish. My own organisation, I'll keep this really quick because I could be here for at least a month explaining it to you, started 110 years ago, so it's quite an obviously well established, and it was called the Home of Peace for the Incurably Ill and Dying. Which sounds pretty dreadful, but these days we talk about palliative care and chronic disease, it's the same thing. different language sounds better. But it was set up by a couple of extraordinary citizens of Perth when Perth was a very small place, to try and assist people who had nowhere else to go. And to be absolutely frank, that's exactly what we're still doing today. And we pick up all sorts of people who fall between the cracks, don't fit the rest of aged care or disability or all of those sorts of things. So it's a wonderful mission, if you like, that we have, and it tests us at every corner, because it's all very well if you stay mainstream, but if you dabble around doing other things and have to scratch around for a bit of support and money and everything else that you might need, and lead people, your own people, through coping with that, it's an interesting exercise. You gain an awful lot of experience. Anyway, when I first went there in 1986, not as CEO, but as the old language medical superintendent, it consisted, and you probably remember it, some of you, a very large nursing hospital, really, nursing home at Subiaco, and a very large one out at Inglewood. And these were really institutional. The buildings were institutional, the hierarchical arrangement in there was institutional, the people who lived there were called inmates. They were just beginning to shed that. With great respect, they were called inmates, but it's pretty pejorative. And the nursing hierarchy started at the top with the matron and worked all its way down. Everyone had different coloured uniforms, and the residents, the inmates, did what they were told, etc. And everybody was highly institutionalised. It was state of the art. It was what you did in those days really, really well, and it had a huge reputation. And all sorts of important people in Perth used to queue up to go there when they thought perhaps they needed a bit of care and attention. We are now a very on the game, in many respects ahead of the game, because I can't cope with the status quo and I've got to be looking into the future. We are now on 13 residential aged care sites from Joondalup to Mandurah. We have at-home services right across Perth, north of Joondalup and south of Mandurah and everywhere in between. So that's our aged care. And we have a number of special units for people to transit out of hospital, so they don't have to stay in hospital and can get out, and while they come to grips with what's their situation in life is, and can have assistance to move on to wherever it is they choose. A very special thing, because when I first went to the Homes of Peace, I saw a lot of young people lying around, and I couldn't cope with this really, because, and really what it was these were people who'd had massive brain injury, who'd been written off, didn't get better in hospital, put them in the Homes of Peace. We had a lot of young people, and over a bit of time I saw some of these young people actually get better. And that was completely contrary to medical wisdom and anything that's written in medical textbooks, and still is to a large extent, because that's the way most of us were brought up and taught, that you don't get better after a very bad brain injury. If you haven't got better in 3 to 6 months, that's it. Where you are at in 2 years is about the limit of what's going to happen to you. Well, I can go back to that later if you want, but to cut an enormously long story short, we now have, and I started it with I had a really fantastic little team of people around me who all trusted each other and summoned up every courageous bolt in our bodies, and we set up a brain injury rehab centre out in Oat Street in East Victoria Park. And we have been in that particular program, and it's very special, and I've got to tell you it's the only one in Australia, and we believe it's the only one in the world. People come from all over the world to see it. It's a real groundbreaker. We give people time, because your brain doesn't recover very quickly. It takes a couple of years or more, sometimes 10 or 20 years to get back to it at its best. We surround every person with a very special rehab package. They make their own goals. They are in a home-like environment in a community setting. You cannot rehabilitate in an institution. I hope nobody here is a hospital tragic. With great respect, hospitals are for what hospitals do, but they don't know what goes on after. We are returning hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young people who would otherwise have been written off home to run their own lives. Most of them actually end up running their own lives. They may need a bit of assistance, but it is a magic, magic place. So I guess what I'm saying is you never know when you start where you're going to end up. But getting that thing going and keeping it going, and it's been going now for 25 years, and we about 20 people a year move out, so you can sort of stack up the numbers. And even at a very conservative estimate, and I had this independently done by a very good economic group, we are returning at least a 4-to-1 on a dollar basis to the community. Every dollar it costs, we're returning at least 4. We're probably returning about 8 or 9. That is a massive investment success, not to speak of people's lives. Anyway, I wasn't going to talk about that. It's just part of the diversity. We're also doing quite a lot of research. I never thought when I was a medical student, and if I did I wouldn't have finished, run a very large laundry that does about 160 tonnes a week. It has very large washing machines which are longer than this room and are like submarines. And it's a seriously commercial laundry. And that started because we had to do our own, and then it grew, and then we found we could sell a bit of surplus, and then we thought, oh, this is at least one way of trying to drive a little bit of extra revenue, because as you know, governments are not very generous with their money. And old people are going to get more and more and more and live longer and longer and longer. And so it's going to become more and more of a burden to the Commonwealth purse. I'm not even going to go there because it's we all know that this is complicated and difficult. But I'm proud to say, like many of you, from what Lynn was saying, I'm in a growth industry, as you are too. So that's Brightwater. There's an awful lot more I could tell you, but I won't. But I'm just trying to explain. We went from 2 very large institutions to this massive, diverse, multi-site, multi-service. We're right ahead trying to keep people at home, etc., etc. That's diversification and expansion in my mode, if you like. So, put on the specs to make sure I don't forget anything. Here are some comments that I might offer you from my experience, and as I say, it may or may not be useful. Leadership is a very nebulous thing. There's no such thing as a description of a leader and everybody has to be like that. And I might say to you, remember this, it doesn't necessarily reside in one person. Leadership, is found at all levels, in all sorts of people, in an organisation. So watch out for it, because it's very precious. Leadership works really well in a team. If you are the leader, you do have to keep your own counsel and lead as an individual, but most of the actual practical leadership goes on. The stronger your team or team of teams is, the better you're going to succeed and the less trouble you're going to have. And you work things out together, because a team isn't just a collection of people. A team is a group of people who all contribute everything they've got, and it's all different, the more diverse, and bring in all the right sets of skills. Don't have the same sets of skills sitting around a table. That's useless. You might as well only have one person. But make it as diversified as you can, and everybody focuses together and pools their contribution. Now, building a team can sometimes be a bit difficult because people are sort of, I do this, I don't do what you do, you don't do what I do. But if you can bust all the barriers and get people to really contribute, you'll have a fantastic leadership potential. The thing I think we don't... One of the reflections I have is that leadership is about 2 crucial things. It's about change, because if you're not changing, you don't need a leader, you need a very good manager. Change requires leadership. And it's about people. Now, I usually get into trouble at this point, and I apologise to anybody that has a financial bent. To me, the world's made of people. Money is a means to an end. It's terribly important, but if you start off on the financial goal, honestly, you're missing the point. Your people will make it happen. So that means you have to think deeply and learn a lot about and use your experience in change, watch other people who are making change happen and learn from them. And you need to really think about how good you are with connecting with people. Some people do it naturally, other people don't, doesn't matter, but you need to understand that people are crucial. And you don't always have to get on with them, but you have to be able to connect with them. So here are a few words. I think, and I'll come back to that, people, and change in a bit. You need a lot of courage to be a leader. And it's a human natural characteristic. The future is unknown. You're leading people into the future, whatever the change is, wherever you're going. And it's a bit scary. So you need to grit your teeth and be courageous and get on with it. You need a lot of courage to dream big and bold. A lot of people will sit on the, we can do this by tomorrow. If you don't dream something really big and stick it up on the horizon like a shining light, you'll never get halfway there. So you've got to have a big, bold dream. Be prepared to change it, that's okay, but you've got to have it so that you've really got an idea of what you're trying to do. Change is very threatening to many people. That's scary too. So you have to be courageous, tell them that it's going to happen and take them with you. And they will get a bit of courage from you if they're a bit frightened. So you have to dare to dream. You've got to share that dream, you've got to use it to inspire people, get their minds and hearts right in your basket, because you've got to get them to be willing and trust you that you're going to be able to do it. The second thing is wisdom. Now, it's a funny word, wisdom. I think it's the sort of accumulation of your experience, your learning, your ability to learn from other people, to admit, when you haven't quite got it right or you don't know what the heck to do, go find out. Wisdom is that sort of collection of being sensible enough to do what you're going to do, and don't be stupid or foolish, and if you're not quite sure, go and find out. And the longer you live, the wiser you should be getting, if you reflect. If you don't reflect and just barge on, you'll never be wise. So seek wisdom. It's a University of WA thing, but I couldn't agree with it more. There's a few letters C now. Capture your people. You've got to get them on side. You won't get them all on side, but go with the majority. You should get about 80 or 90% if you're going all right. There'll always be a few who will sabotage, refuse, resist, but you deal with them separately. And mostly you can get them over. They're frightened, or they're not going to help you. So all this change management thing to capture your people, you've got to start by trying to inspire them, telling the story that we're all going towards. But you have to sit down with them, sometimes individually, and say, this is what it's about, why we're doing it, and everybody's got a different way of interpreting why, whether it's for the big picture or the little picture or for yourself, and you've got to answer that question, what's in it for me? So ask them what they're after, and then see if you can deliver that. Because if you do that on a personal level, if they're being a bit difficult or scared, you'll get them over the line. Because it's fear, a lot of this. Sometimes it takes a while to cross that little bridge with some people. Another C word, be calm. Another one, confident. Your role modelling is more 24 hours a day and more subtle than you will realise. You can stand up like this and talk and people say, wow, or but you're role modelling every inch of every day is what people are watching. It's verbal, it's non-verbal, it's how you walk out of the door. No matter what the news is, good, bad or indifferent, you've got to be calm, serene, and don't let it bother you. Because if you panic or look as if you're upset, they say, yeah, I knew it was wrong, or I'm right, it's scary. The leader thinks so too. So you've got to keep that calm face or demeanour. Confident, you have to appear confident, not overconfident. And sometimes you do the confidence thing and you think, oh, crikey, what's going to happen? I don't think this is going to work. Or, gee, I wish the cheque would come in the mail and it's a week late, or whatever it might be. But please be confident, because that confidence is why people trust you. Another C word, which is crucial and lots of people forget it, you've got to celebrate. often every milestone you get to, and even if you think, wow, they're trying really hard, let's have a cup of tea, a sit down and a sticky button. Doesn't matter, but celebration is really important because they've got to have positive feedback. And besides, it's fun to take 5 minutes out of a day and let your hair down. I don't need to tell you this bit because I'm sure you're all good at it, but you've got to plan. You've got to have a plan, knowing that this roadmap, whatever it is, and you can plan down to the minutest detail, and sometimes in some bits you have to, some bits you can't because you don't know, you haven't got the information, but you've got to plan everything so that everybody's got a roadmap. If you hit a barrier or a dead end or you've got to divert, do it together, but at least you know you're moving off your plan for a particular reason. Having said that, in the top drawer of every CEO or leader, you should have a contingency plan, just in case. Plan B is really important, okay? You don't have to produce it unless you really need it, and hopefully you never will, but it's important that you've thought about what, because you'll do risk analysis, everybody does. If this risk comes to pass, what am I going to do? So contingencies are important. I'm nearly at the end of my comment, so... but this one I find is fascinating, and to be perfect, it's all about recognising barriers. And I hit this when Lynn and I have something in common, as I'm sure you probably know. If you don't, well, I'm telling you. We were Telstra Businesswomen of the Year a long time ago. Lynn preceded me, and it was all in the early days. I think I was number 4 and you were number 2. So we're sort of pioneers here. And that year that it happened to me, 1998... it changes your life, and you suddenly are in great demand, and everybody wants to know, and what do you think about women's chances in the world, and what do you know, how do you do business, and you're asked to speak at I don't know how many times about leadership and all of this. What it did for me was make me reflect very carefully about how the heck I was going to get through this year. Both my parents died that year. We were building a lot of new nursing homes. There was huge changes going on. There were a whole raft of other things in my life, and I thought I was going to drown. And I used to say, I wish there were more hours in the day. I learnt that year to say, thank God there aren't, because I just didn't know, it was seriously difficult. And I was remaining calm and confident and all that stuff I've just told you, excuse me. And, you know, doing as much of the invited speaking as I could. And I sat down about 4 o'clock one morning, because that's what I used to do, get up early to prepare. And I thought to myself, I think my biggest problem is that I'm putting the barrier up because I'm thinking, I can't cope with this, how am I going to deal with it? I try 50 different ways of fitting everything into my day, and I thought, give it up, Penny. Start at the beginning, keep going till you get to the end, and then stop. And if it didn't happen, it'll wait till tomorrow. That was a big lesson for me. The barrier I had was the one I had made. So I just share that with you because when you're in your very busy life, sometimes you have to just take a step back and say, that's a big barrier I can get rid of, because the minute I got rid of it, I stopped worrying. Big emotional effort worrying. Do away with it. That's one sort of barrier. There are barriers you cannot get around at any given time, and they're often the external rules and compliance requirements and funding and government policy and all of those things. You have to work within those sorts of barriers. Sometimes if you wait long enough, they shift, but you have to accept the fact that that's something you can't shift. There are a whole lot of other barriers you can fix. If people aren't getting it right, have you trained them? Have they got the skills? Have you got them organised? All the rest of it. So identify the barriers you can fix and fix them. So make a bit of a practice of identifying barriers, otherwise you bump up. Now, there's another sort of barrier which is much more insidious. And when you're moving from an institutional to a modern organisation, or you're trying to get rid of the way things have always been done, this barrier is called a sacred cow. I'm sure you all know about sacred cows. They're in the language every now and again, but they're really important because they stop you doing what you're trying to do. And one of the ways they manage it is because they're insidious and invisible. They're the things that happen when people say, oh, we've always done it this way. We've always had this. That'll never work. If I count the number of times I've heard people near and close, including at times government bodies, telling me that'll never work, I would have stopped a long time ago. When people say that'll never work, you think, there's a sacred cow. Drag it out from behind the curtains, wherever it is it's hiding, give it a good look, and then kill it. The best thing to do with sacred cows is actually make hamburgers, because then you can eat them. They're very hard to identify, so you've got to be tuned in for a sacred cow. One of the biggest difficulties when I first started in those two big institutions was to undo the hierarchy. Well, it was nearly impossible. Then I took away uniforms. Well, you'll never know who the nurse is, we never do this. The wardsmaids are in green and the doctors wear white coats and the purple ones are something else. And the other thing we did, which was outrageous to most of my business colleagues in Australia, was we started building nursing homes in little houses in the street. Wow. And I gave everybody their own bedroom and bathroom. Well, my board said, why are you having 30 bathrooms in a 30-bed little 5-house place? And I said, well, would you like to share a public toilet with someone you've never met and don't like for the rest of your life? 30 bathrooms. I wasn't that aggressive, I've got to tell you. These are sacred cows. You will never progress unless you make sure those things are out of the way. They're not as easy as I have laughingly said to get rid of, but you've got to get your little leaders who are at all levels in the organisation, the ones that influence all the people around you, and completely change everybody's focus and paint the dream of how it's going to be. If somebody's got to leave their home because they can't cope anymore and they've got all sorts of dreadful conditions, the least we can do is give them a home. Our home or their home. Our home is what it had happened. And now what are we doing? We're all building home-like environments, and it's de rigueur, and my generation, which is the baby boomer one, is not going to put up with any old institution anymore, or being told to go into one or anything. The whole expectation of our consumers, our customers, is shifting as we speak. I just want to come back in my last little sentence to that people and change. My favourite definition, and this is my last word before questions, my favourite definition of leadership sounds too simple to be true, but the more you think about it, the more there is in it. And it was Dwight Eisenhower, and I have to paraphrase what he said because it was, said a long time ago, and it was a little bit... It talks about men. Leadership is the art. There's a lot of science in leadership, but remember the art, because that's the human, intuitive, flexible, experience-requiring bit. Leadership is the art of getting your people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. Got that? It's very simple, and I love the language, and the more I think about it, the wiser it gets. Because if you can actually do that, you're the most fantastic leader that ever lived. And all the lessons are in that sentence. It's the art of getting your people to do what you want because they want to do it. Thank you.
I wonder if there's any questions for Penny.
You can disagree. It's okay.
There must be someone out there that wants to proffer a... Oh, here we go, please.
Did you find... Sorry. Councillor Brown, did you find that trying to get people to open up and be transparent and open about how the organisation worked was beneficial, or did you find that keeping things closed worked?
I think whenever, I suppose when I turned up, I was a bit of a threat because they'd never had a medical person there before. They'd had visiting general practitioners, but nobody that was going to do anything in particular. And there was an awful lot to do. Not that there was anything wrong, but there was an awful lot of things that had to be put in and organised. And I was kept out by the hierarchy for quite a long time. And I was quite surprised at that because I'd never had difficulty ever, and I still don't now, relating very well to any health professional, particularly nurses. And I must have been a very grave threat because they were terribly polite and they wouldn't let me in by an inch. So for a while I manoeuvred around the edges and got a whole lot of things done that they told me I couldn't do. And I think without being threatening, without demanding anything of them, I just set up a whole lot of things. I got my infection control, I got my medical records, I got my pharmacy, I got a whole lot of things done which they weren't particularly interested. Once they'd sort of let me in, as you very perceptively see, the sacred cows were very large in those days, and I understood that. I guess I sort of manoeuvred a bit. I helped them when they had, when you're setting up a business, it's very important to find out what is the pain, what is it that people need, and then you supply the answer. So I went at it like that to make life a whole lot easier. I had a couple of battles where I did actually put my foot down, but I knew I was going to win those, and I wasn't disrespectful. It's really important not to have a personal row, but to make a point and make sure it works. I had one, I'm telling tales out of school, but it was a long time ago. I had one with a GP. He told me, he came in one day and he said, well, what are you doing about this? I'm not going to write in the notes, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do that. I've never done it before. And I said, well, you are, because it's actually legal and it's professional practice. And he thought, here's a girl, she wouldn't know what she's talking about. I was in that sort of situation. So I said, no, I'm not giving way on this one. This has actually got to happen. He said, right, I'm going. I said, now, or are you giving me notice? He said, now. I said, goodbye. And afterwards, I sat down and closed my door and I shook for half an hour because it was not very pleasant. To your own professional colleagues, you don't do that sort of thing. So I suppose in a way I'd sort of been able to... People get to know that, around the place. They think, oh, God, she sacked the doctor. And I actually hadn't. He chose... But people understand that there are places beyond which you will not go. This is correct and proper, and it's the right thing to do. But in every other respect, we all got together. I eventually got a few teams going, got some nurses on it, and suddenly we cheered because we'd succeeded at doing something or other that they hadn't been able to do before. I took over some tasks that they really didn't like doing. I got other hospitals and geriatricians involved. Well, that was something new. So we weren't isolated anymore. So, sorry, I'm telling it the long way round, but you have to work at it, and if you start at the beginning and it's all very big, you've got to nibble at it. Look for opportunities, get some wins, be always respectful and pleasant, and include people whether they want to be included or not. So it's a bit like, I can't quote that Mahatma Gandhi thing, but you have to behave the way you want other people to behave. And sometimes it's a long, hard job, but you just keep going. And then the momentum gathers. And then you get some bright spark who said, oh, I never dared say that to matron so-and-so, but actually it's a good idea. And you think, good, I've got another one on board. And so you build up, and when you get to the tipping point, and then you dare to dream and you do something excruciatingly different, and they say, we can, And so you pull them over. And once you've got it like that, the rest is so much easier, and you can do all sorts of wonderful things. And then you're teaching them how to resist the resistance to change outside. And it's exciting. And you do have sticky buns and cups of tea every now and again, even if it's to sit there and be catty about people. I can't cope with that anymore. And everybody gets a chance to dump, and then you get all better and go again. It's reading your people. Sorry, this is very sort of intimate, personal stuff with your staff. And sometimes you go and rescue someone, and you do it very privately and sit them down and say, look, what can we do to sort this out? And they emerge, and nobody knows that you've had the conversation. They come out and they're doing it, and you think, yes. And they go, fantastic. It's just intuitive in a way, but being sensible and not giving in to what I consider to be power demonstration by somebody for the sake of it, just to let me know, I just ignore that. Sacred cows, some of them, you just ignore them. Not playing that game. And don't, if you've got somebody that's really pushing you around or thinks they can stop you, when you have conversations, do them on your territory, not theirs. Use your language, not theirs, because you're actually drawing them in. They have got to communicate properly. But if you go and see them in their office and they're sitting there saying, I'm not going to do this, well, you've got to then get over the hump. But if you've got them halfway over the hump in your office or out for a cup of coffee down the plaza or something, you've cut out all the nasty obstacles that they rely on. And you do it smilingly. And you've got them. You don't always win. I've had a few failures. That wasn't a very scientific answer, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Sometimes it takes a long time. But if you're still there in 5 years' time saying the same thing, they will give in the end. Yeah. Once in my life I've walked away from a job and resigned. Only once.
Any other questions? Please, thank you.
Hello, Anne Wood from Cock.
Hi.
Anne Wood from Cock Cunning. I'm not sure if you want to give the lawyer the microphone. That might be a bit dangerous. I'm really interested in your leadership style. I feel like you have a really personal touch to talking to your people, and I'm wondering how you managed to do that with 13 sites.
Yeah, and more than that, all over the place. I can't get out to every site very often. But whatever the arrangements are, I'll and sometimes when there are difficulties, I'll certainly be very involved to support, not tell them what to do. So I keep my finger on the pulse in the organisation. I like to know what's going on. I have regular meetings with all the people I need to have regular meetings, and that's very important. But I need the corridor conversations. I don't mind if it takes me 5 minutes to get to my office, if I'm picking up or exchanging something that's actually adds to... I just need to keep my finger on the pulse. When I do my best to orient new staff, and at the moment that's happening every fortnight, and I explain to them very clearly, and it fixes them up sometimes. So I stand there and I'm being friend explaining about Brightwater, and I say, who are the most important? I make them work out who the customer is. Who's the most important people in this organisation? And they generally come up with the residents, the clients, the families and all of that. Yes, they've got that. Who are the next most important? They look at each other and they say, well, the care workers. I said, absolutely, because you guys are next to dealing with, coping with, washing them, looking after them, making their life the life they want. You're the next most important people. So then I draw the triangle upside down and I'm at the bottom. My job is to make sure you can do your job. And then I finish it off by saying, just to make sure you really understand, you think I'm the boss. You can do without me for a week, but I cannot do without you. You are really important. And so I treat them as equals. When I go out on sites, I treat everybody as an equal. I don't know all their names, but I'm not called Dr Flett, I'm called Penny. Whoops. When I go out to the laundry, which is where I'm going shortly for my goodbyes, I go there for a dose of hugs, because I've known some of the girls that work out there for 25 years. So we disappear down the back corner. It's a bit of a ritual. And we do a bit of gossip, and I find out about their families. They're Anglo-Indian people, and I love them to death, and we've gone through all sorts of thick and thin together. They treat me with a lot of respect, and I treat them, but I know that we relish that relationship. So I'm not being silly, and business at work relationships are always professional, but there's that personal touch that you can bring in, and if you're sensible about it and there's respect in it, you can do it, and it's such a pleasure. That's all there is to it. I'm friends, but professionally. Even amongst my senior people, and I know them really, really well, and we've gone through some really difficult times together, we have the huge benefits of knowing each other, our strengths, our whatevers, and I've confessed to them I've been pretty humble when I've done things wrong, and vice versa. So that's a very close personal interaction. But when push comes to shove, this is professional. And that's an interesting, and at times it's important to be very distant from people, and at times it helps to be close, because you can ring them up and they'll say, oh, I'll do it, or, I'll help you out, or whatever it is. It's just a personal thing. And I'm not an extrovert, believe it or not. I am an absolute introvert. If I'm in my office, I shut up. I drive to work, I shut up. After work, I go home. I'm not a big introvert, so I'm not running over people.
I just think there's one more question down the back, and then we have to draw the morning to a close.
How do you deal with staff gossip?
With
Staff gossip?
staff gossip, well, I ignore it. I do not gossip, I'm not interested. I'm aware it goes on. I don't... Of course it goes on. If it starts to gain momentum about something, obviously I know about it and I'll go and sort it out. It usually happens when there's somebody that's really disgruntled and they're making trouble. I'll go and sort out what that trouble is. That's what I mean. If you work on the premise that 95% of your people are with you and you treat them that way and you give them your trust, don't wait for them to earn it, the 2%, whatever it is, that are a problem, you sort them out separately in a different way altogether. You sit them down, maybe it gets to performance management, whatever it is. If they're generating gossip, that's a major problem and I won't have it. Come and tell me what the problem is and I'll help you sort it out. If they're sabotaging, some people just have to leave in the end. I can be quite ruthless. People think I'm all fluffy. No. Underneath, every now and again, I come out with something, they go, whoops. She actually does know what she fixes things, yeah. So, always respect people. You can have fights. You'll have a union person coming in very strongly supporting a person who's actually isn't getting it right. We have a terrific relationship with unions. We choose our battles to win the wars. I have a lot of respect for unions. They're doing their job to help their members, and we're quite heavily unionised. And I respect that, and I'll say to them, I'm doing exactly the same. The staff are the most important people in my organisation. Every now and again we have a little battle, by and large we don't. But if you have to, you do, respectfully. Because if they're coming in all aggressive and you're sitting there being very polite and respectful, they've lost the conversation. They can't beat you. If you're aggressive back, forget it. Choose another day on another time.
I'd just like to bring this part of the event to a close, and if everyone could thank Penny very much for a wonderful presentation.